Hey everybody, welcome to Game Informer. I'm one of our video editors, Alex Van Aken. Today I am joined by associate editor, Liana Ruppert. Hello.
What up?
And then we've got a very special guest, creator of the Game Awards. You know him from the Summer Games Fest earlier this year, opening night live. It's Geoff Keighley. Welcome, Geoff.
Hello, guys. Good to see you.
It's crazy because like the Game Awards was huge. Every year I feel like you guys make it a lot bigger. And then we also have like the Oscars comparisons. Can you talk about this year? This year we had a lot more celebrities, it felt like, and a lot more announcements. Thank you for the dual Mass Effect and Dragon Age reveal, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
Yes.
Thanks, guys. It's look, I'm just happy we got to do the show this year. We spent months and months just worrying, right, about could we produce a live show, what would it look like, and being in LA where we do the show, it hasn't been a great couple of weeks for COVID numbers. So yeah, there's constant kind of fear around being able to do the show. So we were so happy that we were able to make it. And to your point, we were lucky to have like lots of awesome guests, cool game announcements. The show was very full because when in April or May, I was worried there might not be games to announce because everyone was work from home and things were delayed. So yeah, we were really lucky this year that the show could happen, and yeah, had like you said, awesome guests from Hollywood and cool game guests, and that's what I love to do is try and sort of bring pop culture together inside of the show. It's all about a balance, right? It's a balance between awards and world premieres. It's also a balance between who presents awards and the music, right? Getting Eddie Vedder to do his song from Last of Us. We want everything to be authentic, but that's the magic of the show.
You even got Wonder Woman. What the heck, man?
I know.
That was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, and I see this all on Twitter where, some people are very pure that they just want game developers presenting to game developers. But to me, it's like, I think it's cool to have other talent that is there to appreciate the medium and pay tribute. Gal was there presenting games for Impact, and she, like presented the category to her. She was passionate about what these games, what they meant, what they were trying to drive towards. Christopher Nolan presenting Game of the Year. It's like, I think it elevates the industry to have everyone in the same room together, and they're obviously all there to give awards to game developers. So it's not, sometimes people are like, well, why do you need those Hollywood names? Like, I just want game developers. And, I think it's kind of interesting and different that we can mix these things up and have, Chris Nolan present an award to Naughty Dog, which is cool. And again, we still had Reggie present an award, and we still had Joseph Fares announce his game. So we have game developers in there. But yeah, it's fun for us to be able to, we're just in a unique position to be able to do that kind of stuff. That's what we do. I'm curious,
what does that process look like when you're kind of lining up your roster for, the year? It's like, all right, are we reaching directly out to Gal, or are we putting a signal out, putting the bat signal up and seeing who comes in? Like, what's your perspective on how you approach that?
Smooth with the DC reference. And
I know.
I like it.
Yeah, it honestly is. It's just sort of an ongoing conversation with those things. I mean, there are tons of people that we reach out to who aren't available. Like we really like Henry Cavill. We really want to do something fun with him because he did the amazing kind of build a PC video, and he was filming The Witcher and couldn't do it. So it's like, it depends on who we go to. Like Gal was, we've done a lot of cool stuff with Warner Brothers over the years. Warner Brothers on our board on the game side. So that was just it was just kind of a good fit. Tom Holland was there because he was doing the Uncharted movie. Which they wanted to do a fun thing with him and Nolan together, so that came together. So yeah, it's honestly, there's no rhyme or reason to how it comes together. Sure. It's just sort of months of just talking to people and kind of trying to figure out the right fit and right mix of things in the show. And we're lucky as the show continues to grow that I think increasingly more and more people are looking to, the Game Awards is one of the big award shows of the year, just for entertainment, period. And games are at the heart of it. So what we really always want to make sure is that, it's authentic and that people are really there for the right reason. And, like the talent was there this year, very reverential to games, right? I think Chris Nolan is fascinated by this world. It was great. Brie Larson obviously has had a huge year kind of, around games and with Animal Crossing, what she did with Nintendo. So that made a ton of sense. And I got to say, like when, Brie was posting on social media all day getting ready for the Game Awards. Like, it was like she was going to the Oscars. And it was cool for me to see, that kind of crossover that is possible inside of the show if it's done in an authentic way. So yeah, everything comes to us sort of through different ways and different people every year. But I'm really proud of the mix of things that came into the show this year.
Yeah. And this was, I feel like every year you guys outdo yourselves. And this year was the biggest yet in terms for viewership, right? How big was the turnout?
Yeah, we're so grateful. Viewership was up like over 50% year over year. And you know, on Twitch and YouTube, like double the audience effectively that tuned in. So yeah, we're as I said at the beginning, like we're amazed we were able to do the show, and the fact that it could grow like this was great. Because when we first started this year, a lot of people, you know, they'd be like, "Well, it's a virtual event. What does that mean?" And like, you know, you're still gonna have the same audience. And I always maintain that this gaming audience, you know, we're all sitting at home watching this stuff, and there's more available time because we're not going to other events. We're not going to a concert. We're not going to sporting games. We're all kind of home. And it's been a huge year for games with the new console launches and everything. So yeah, we were really happy to see the growth, which is good for the show, but I also hope people see it as good for the industry, that there's so much interest and excitement around gaming, that our show continues to grow into, you know, one of the major award shows for entertainment now, which is, you know, it's a huge honor.
So I have to ask, and feel free not to answer if you don't want to. With between last year and this year, there was a similar reaction. People were opposed to Death Stranding's immense presence, and this year there's a lot of discourse around The Last of Us being so notable. We did our own pre-show, and we were all assuming Last of Us was going to sweep because of how intricate the story is, and they really did go above and beyond in terms of accessibility. What's your reaction to the general discussion around pushing back against The Last of Us, and what is your reaction to? I believe I don't remember off the top of my head which outlet covered it, but somebody covered about celebrating the downside of celebrating a studio that has kind of a crunch narrative attached to it.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's a healthy debate and discussion. All the award stuff I say somewhat separate to, as people know, last year from Death Stranding, where it's sort of like, you know, we let the media, of which Game Informer is a member of the jury, select the nominees and help select the winners. You know, the Last of Us conversation it's a fair conversation. I think, you know, it's definitely a somewhat, you know, polarizing game, which is part of, I think, its appeal to some people, right? Is that it really is, you know, kind of controversial. And, you know, in a year with like Breath of the Wild, it's sort of unanimous, right? People are like, this game is truly amazing and like, you know, deserves to be celebrated this year. I mean, you know, Last of Us, you know, there were games like Half-Life Alyx is one of my favorite games here, wasn't even nominated for Game of the Year. So it depends every year on what happens. But I think what I will say about Last of Us is that we do our Player's Voice award, which is 100% voted by the fans, and that starts with 30 games. And the final two games that got the highest number of votes were, you know, Ghost of Tsushima and The Last of Us. So it's not that the fans aren't out there, right? And I think sometimes, you know, it's obviously controversial. And yeah, I see all the, you know, the Game Awards is rigged, and you know, all these other comments online. And I mean, it's you can say it, but there's no evidence to support that. And I do think there are a lot of fans out there that really do care about that game. So, you know, sometimes it's like, oh, the critics are opposed to what the fans think. And a certain percentage of the fans, if you look at our Player's Voice, that's why we do that. It's 100% voted on by the fans, and Last of Us came second to Ghost of Tsushima. So there are a lot of fans out there. The second point on, you know, the sort of the zeitgeist around a game and the, you know, the studio and the culture, it's a healthy conversation to have. It's a difficult thing to really determine sort of how to adjudicate that on the award side of, you know, does a game become ineligible, or, you know, how does that factor into the voting? You know, I think it's totally fair game to discuss these things, to have these, you know, conversations, these news articles about this stuff. I'm sure it factors into people's, you know, perception of a game, both in terms of the public and the jury, and that is part of the process. So I think it's fair to discuss. It's hard for me though to think of on the show side how we start to factor that into our like eligibility criteria for games. It becomes, I think, a slippery slope, right? Because then you look at like the diversity of studios and decide, well, this game is, this game is eligible, this game isn't eligible. So we tend to just say everything's eligible, and it's up to the, the voting body to decide how those things factor into their, their voting and decision making. So yeah, it's just tough because something like crunch is obviously an issue in the gaming industry. But I don't know how we can sort of objectively look across the entire industry and make determinations on, whether a game should be eligible or not, or should be, knock down points because this game had, crunch around it or other issues with the studio. So I'm open to the discussion, but I don't know that we're at a point that we can really figure out how to approach that. But we're open to ideas and feedback from people on it.
Yeah. And you guys, how do you talked a little bit about like the process of choosing which games are included. What does that process look like with all of those games? Like you were talking about Alex, you really wanted that to be a contender and it deserved to be, darn it. But like we were having, I think Ben and I were, and Alex too, were standing that hard, like, no, Alex is the winner. You guys just don't know it yet. But how do you condense so many releases into just 5 nominees?
Yeah, it's just the process of we send out a ballot, and Game Informer is one of the voting outlets, and 96 outlets around the world vote for the nominees, and then we just tally them up. Yeah, Alex is a unique scenario, and it's an amazing game, but it's limited audience because it's VR. I'm sure that factored into why it didn't get a Game of the Year nomination, just because it's limited with VR, and even that's the same thing with like a fan vote. Makes it even harder, right? Because if this is purely fan voted, it's like not enough fans have played Alex compared to a big third person multi-platform action game. So that's one of the reasons we have this kind of split between the jury and fans. Is if it was just a pure popularity contest, a single platform game and certainly a VR only game like Alex would be even more challenged in the voting. But everyone has their own opinions. It's also a very global panel with folks all around the world that are voting on things. So yeah, I think generally, we have a pretty good list of games that get nominated, and part of the mystery and magic of the show is that there are only 6 nominees. Like we could have 15 nominees for Game of the Year, but it's just less interesting because you really want to sort of like make it more of a tight race, and inevitably there will be snubs, there will be surprises, and that's kind of what makes this even more interesting for folks. So yeah, I'm personally bummed when Alex wasn't nominated for Game of the Year. And it's like I always have to divorce myself from the nominees and the winners because I have no say at all. So when we see the results, they are what they are. So
I feel like there's a misconception with that. I think people
for sure
are like secretly back there with like a mustache, like ha ha ha.
No, that's what
Tsushima fans prepare to cry.
no, that's what happened last year with Death Stranding, right? That I was rigging it for Kojima and giving him all these nominations, and I just have to be very clear that I'm too close to the industry because I'm working on the world premieres, I'm working on the sponsorships. Like I just try and stay separate from that. But yeah, because the show is my brand, right? It's like, I produce it, I host it, like you said, inevitably it's like, oh, Geoff picked this for Game of the Year, or, I get all that in my feed of like, how could you, select Last of Us as Game of the Year? And it's like, I didn't select Last of Us as Game of the Year. It's, the group of people that are empowered to do that. And that church and state separation is important, but you make a great point that people just assume somehow that I'm making all these selections, and I would select differently probably than the panel in certain categories, and that's fair game.
I'm like interested in how big your mute list is on Twitter. Like
really not that big. I just sort of just follow along. I mean, I'm really interested in the feedback across the board, and sometimes it's disappointing when people or like this is rigged, or I went through that last year with Death Stranding, right, where there was sort of this perceived controversy that I had somehow rigged the nominations for Kojima, and that was hurtful to me personally because it's just not who I am and not how we run things. And I think then when finally Death Stranding didn't win Game of the Year, people are like, okay, I guess it wasn't all corrupt. So yeah, it's tough sometimes to just sort of see people naturally assume that there's some rigging, or I was paid off by Neil Druckmann to give them Game of the Year or something, and it's just so absurd that you just kind of People are allowed to have that opinion if they want. There's no basis in truth around any of that stuff, of course. But people are passionate about games in this industry, and I think it's great to express your opinion around it. And it's okay to disagree with it, who wins in the category. Like, that's fine, and it's not objective. It's like, this is the opinion of the people that voted, that this is what they think is game of the year. And I get that our show is so big now and prominent that it people really care about the winners. So I'd much rather have that passion than just apathy around the show and not caring about the winners. So it's a healthy debate, and yeah, we certainly saw a lot of that. Every year we see that, right? I mean, the year was like God of War versus Red Dead, and there were a lot of people that thought, Red Dead should have won over God of War. Last year was probably a little more up in the air, right, about what was going to win. Sekiro ultimately won. But yeah, I in some ways I like that The Last of Us is a game at a technical quality level that you really can debate, like the story and the characters and the plot choices. And it's a game that is polarizing, so some people love it, some people hate it, and that was, I think, a little bit of the intent of that game, was to really affect you as an individual. And I think it's really healthy that there are games where people can say, I think this is amazing, and someone else think this game is terrible. And that I like, because it's kind of boring if it's like everything's just so objective and like, this game is clearly a 98 and everyone agrees with that. I think it's different. The Last of Us conversation is different than, say, like the Cyberpunk conversation that's going on now, right? Where it's sort of like, there are technical issues and challenges with that. The Last of Us, I don't think anyone would argue with the fact that it's, immaculately sort of crafted, right, as a kind of story experience. It's just people have, concerns around the character choices and story choices in that game. And look, I have my own opinions about that too. But there's no doubt that there's a lot of, craft that went into making that game.
How did you, I know earlier this year you produced, Summer Game Fest. How did you approach that from a production standpoint? And, what were some of those learnings that you brought into the Game Awards this year, since, we can't be together in person?
Yeah. Summer Game Fest came out of the void that was E3 and just the idea that, hey, new consoles are launching this year. We have to have some way to bring everyone together. And I just was at home and set up a spare room with like a little studio just to broadcast and stream, which I never really had done before. And I had a lot of fun just kind of learning about, the streaming culture. And every year we have thousands of people that co-stream Game Awards. I'm sure you guys do too. And it's like, it was just something I never got to experience because I was always there doing the show. So I got to see what it was like to co-stream events and what it was like to kind of work with the community on these streaming platforms. I did this weekly Zoom call even I was doing with fans this fall, just to kind of get feedback. It just, the thing with Summer Game Fest, it just made me realize that the audience is going to show up anyways, and you don't necessarily have to have some huge set with thousands of people. Like, I was doing broadcasts from my spare room when I did like the PlayStation 5 controller. That was just me doing it by myself. So it was empowering to sort of see that you could still do stuff like that. And I think gave me the confidence that we would do Game Awards in some form. And there was a scenario where I was going to have to do Game Awards, from that spare room, from that setup, if, everything got shut down in LA. And they had a satellite truck outside my house where it's like, I potentially was going to have to do Game Awards that way. So if anything, it just gave me some confidence knowing that, like, worst case, we could still do the Game Awards that way. And I don't think I ever publicly stated this, but a lot of what I was doing this summer, I think, was confidence building on my part to say, hey, worst case, I can kind of learn how to do this myself. And that might be what we could do for Game Awards.
Nice. But yeah, with COVID and all that, like, what sort of, what's your crew look like trying to produce something remotely from LA without an audience, your guests are
it was largely still the same team that does Game Awards, produced it, and lots of COVID testing and things like that.
For sure.
We obviously didn't have our audience team or our red carpet team or things like that. But yeah, we work with a lot of the same team as Game Awards. A lot of the folks that worked on the Emmys joined us as well to help with sort of a lot of the remote acceptance speeches and whatnot, similar to what the Emmys had done. But yeah, we have a great team. I'm really proud of what they all did this year, because we had to reinvent the wheel in a lot of ways. And that was something that was, more challenging this year than other years, because normally we're at the theater, we know roughly what we're doing. It's just a question of, well, who's going to present this award, or what band is going to play. This year, we didn't even know where we were going to be or, what was possible to produce. So same thing with like the Gamescom show that we did in August. That was another kind of test of like, could we do a live show in a studio? What would that look like? So yeah, the Summer Game Fest and the Gamescom show, all done by the same team. And we were just trying to learn as we go to be able to pull something off in December.
Well, great. Well, before we wrap up, Liana, do you have any other questions for Geoff?
I just want to know what's next. Like where's the limit for Game Awards, or how big are you going to take this thing?
I mean, I hope the show will just grow with the gaming industry. And I was never that worried about the audience this year, because if you look at Twitch and YouTube, they've almost doubled in size year over year, just in terms of just general, audience and traffic. So naturally, all boats rise, and Game Awards rose again. So I hope it's just a good sign that the industry is going to continue to grow. It's been a banner year for gaming. I mean, so many great games, new consoles. Well, the rest of the entertainment world has struggled to produce content. I'm really proud of what the gaming industry as a whole has been able to put together. So, I hope we'll just keep growing Game Awards and my goal is to make it the world's biggest awards show that just happens to be about video games. And I think we're kind of on that path. I mean, to double our audience almost kind of every year is insane. So I don't know where it's going, and eventually it's going to slow down. And to be totally honest with you, I live in fear every year, because it's like it keeps growing, but there's going to be that year when it doesn't grow, and the kind of growth that we show, it's nuts. And like, there's going to be a year where it's like, oh, we only had 80 million viewers, and it's like I'm still amazed that it keeps growing. And it's not like we spend extra money on marketing or engineer that. We just try and make the best possible show we can, and it's always kind of worked out. So I don't know what the future brings, but we're just going to kind of keep doing what we're doing because it seems to be working.
Well, Geoff, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Thank you, everybody, for watching this interview, and we'll see you later.
Thanks, guys.